In the dead of night, a luxury yacht shattered against jagged rocks, and one man's split-second decision changed two lives forever. She's a powerful CEO with secrets buried deep beneath her success. He's a single father haunted by the ghosts of his past, trying to rebuild a quiet life far from the chaos he once knew. When freezing water threatened to swallow her whole, he didn't hesitate. He dove into the darkness without thinking twice. But saving her life was just the beginning. What starts as a desperate rescue in icy waters becomes a journey neither of them expected. A collision of two worlds that shouldn't fit together, yet somehow do. Wealth and struggle, loss and hope, pain and healing. Their paths were never meant to cross, but fate had other plans. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind cut through the Oregon coast like a blade, carrying the sharp scent of salt and pine as Hunter Tate stood on the weathered dock of Crescent Bay Marina. At 42, Hunter had built a life of careful routine. Mornings at his small boat repair workshop, afternoons with his teenage son, and evenings spent in the quiet solitude of their modest cottage overlooking the harbor. The rhythm was predictable, safe, and exactly what he needed after the chaos that had defined his earlier years. Hunter's hands, calloused and strong, worked methodically as he secured the final knot on a sailboat's rigging. The marina was nearly empty at this late hour, most vessels tucked away for the approaching winter storms. He preferred it this way. The solitude, the sound of water lapping against hulls, the absence of questions about who he'd been before settling in this sleepy coastal town. 5 years had passed since he'd arrived in Crescent Bay with his then 13-year-old son, both of them carrying wounds that time was slowly, painfully healing. His son, 18-year-old Travis, was everything to him now. The boy had been just a kid when Hunter's wife, Michelle, walked out on them 7 years ago, unable to handle the weight of Hunter's struggles after he'd left his previous career. The divorce had been swift and cold, her departure leaving a hole that Hunter filled with determination to be the father Travis deserved. They'd moved here, seeking peace, a place where the past couldn't reach them, where Hunter could work with his hands and Travis could grow up away from the shadows that haunted their old life. Tonight, Travis was at a friend's house studying for college entrance exams, leaving Hunter alone with his thoughts and the November chill. He glanced at his watch, 11:47 p.m. Time to head home. He gathered his tools, the familiar weight of his worn leather bag a comfort, and began the walk toward his truck parked at the marina's edge. That's when he heard it. A distant rumble, then a sickening crunch that echoed across the water. Hunter's head snapped toward the sound, his instincts sharpening instantly. Out beyond the harbor's protective breakwater, maybe half a mile offshore, he saw lights, the unmistakable glow of a vessel, but moving erratically, listing badly. Another crash followed, and Hunter realized with growing alarm that the boat was hitting the submerged rocks near Devil's Spine, a treacherous reef that had claimed more than a few careless sailors over the years. Without hesitation, Hunter dropped his bag and sprinted toward the marina office where the emergency radio was kept. His boots pounded against the wooden planks, adrenaline flooding his system. He burst through the door, grabbed the radio handset, and called for the Coast Guard. Rattling off coordinates and details with the precision of someone who'd once operated under far more dangerous circumstances. Vessel in distress at Devil's Spine. Single boat appears to be a mid-sized yacht. Struck the rocks. I'm going out now. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. Sir, Coast Guard response time is 25 minutes. Weather conditions are deteriorating. Do not attempt. Hunter didn't wait to hear the rest. He slammed the handset down and ran to his own boat, a sturdy 26-foot workboat he used for marine repairs. The engine roared to life, and he guided the vessel out of the calm harbor into the open water beyond. The swells grew immediately, the ocean churning with a kind of raw power that demanded respect. November storms in the Pacific Northwest were unforgiving, and tonight the sea was proving it. As he approached Devil's Spine, the scene came into sharp focus. A sleek white yacht, probably 60 feet long and worth more than Hunter would make in a lifetime, had run aground on the rocks. Its bow was lifted at an awkward angle, waves smashing against its hull with relentless fury. The vessel was taking on water fast, and Hunter could see someone on deck, a figure clinging to the railing, illuminated by the yacht's emergency lights. He maneuvered as close as he dared, the rocks threatening to tear his own boat apart if he miscalculated. The figure on the yacht was a woman, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her white evening dress soaked and clinging to her frame. She was shouting something, but the wind tore her words away. Hunter could see the panic in her body language, the way she gripped the railing as another wave crashed over the deck. The yacht lurched suddenly, a grinding sound of metal and fiberglass tearing. The woman lost her grip and fell into the water with a splash that Hunter barely heard over the roar of the sea. His heart hammered. The water temperature this time of year was near freezing. She had minutes at best before hypothermia set in. Hunter didn't think. He kicked off his boots, stripped off his heavy jacket, and dove. The cold hit him like a freight train, stealing his breath and shocking every nerve in his body. The water was black, disorienting, the current pulling at him with invisible hands. He surfaced, gasping, and searched frantically for the woman. There, a pale hand breaking the surface 10 yards away, then disappearing again. He swam hard, his muscles screaming in protest against the cold. His training from years ago kicked in, overriding the panic, focusing his mind. Reach her. Get her to the boat. Don't think about the cold. Don't think about anything else. He reached her just as she went under again. His hand closed around her arm, and he hauled her up, her face breaking the surface. She was conscious, but barely. Her lips already tinged blue, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. She tried to speak, but only managed a choked gasp. "I've got you," Hunter shouted over the wind. "Hold on to me." She clutched at him weakly, her strength fading fast. Hunter wrapped one arm around her and began the brutal swim back to his boat. Every stroke was agony, the cold seeping into his bones, his limbs growing heavy. The distance seemed impossible. The boat, a tiny island of safety in a hostile sea. But he pushed forward, dragging them both through the swells, refusing to let go. When they finally reached the boat, Hunter summoned every ounce of remaining strength to lift her over the side. She collapsed onto the deck, shaking violently. He pulled himself up after her, his body trembling uncontrollably now, and immediately wrapped her in the emergency blanket he kept in the storage compartment. Then he threw another over his own shoulders and started the engine, pointing the bow back toward the harbor. The ride back was a blur of cold and adrenaline. Hunter kept glancing at the woman, making sure she was still conscious. She stared at him through chattering teeth, her dark eyes filled with shock and something else. Gratitude, maybe, or disbelief. She tried to speak several times, but he shook his head. "Save your strength," he said. "We're almost there." When they reached the marina, an ambulance was already waiting, its lights painting the dock in red and blue. Hunter guided the boat in, and Coast Guard personnel rushed forward to help. They lifted the woman onto a stretcher, wrapping her in heated blankets, checking her vitals with practiced efficiency. Hunter stood on the dock, dripping and shaking, watching them work. A paramedic approached him. "Sir, you need medical attention too. That water—" "I'm fine," Hunter said, though his voice didn't sound convincing, even to himself. "You saved her life," the paramedic insisted, "but you're showing signs of hypothermia. Come with us." Hunter wanted to refuse, to go home and forget this whole night. But his legs chose that moment to buckle. Strong hands caught him, guided him to a second stretcher. As they loaded him into the ambulance, he caught one last glimpse of the woman. She was looking at him, her hand reaching out weakly, her lips forming words he couldn't hear. Then the ambulance doors closed, and the world faded to the rhythm of sirens and the lingering cold that had settled deep in his chest. At the hospital, Hunter was treated for mild hypothermia and released 3 hours later with instructions to rest and stay warm. He called Travis, who rushed to pick him up, full of questions and worry. Hunter downplayed the whole thing, saying it was just part of being at the marina. But Travis wasn't fooled. "Dad, you dove into freezing water to save someone," Travis said as they drove home through the pre-dawn darkness. "That's not nothing." Hunter stared out the window, watching the ocean pass by. "Anyone would have done it." "No," Travis said quietly. "They wouldn't have." Back at their cottage, Hunter showered until the hot water ran cold, trying to chase away the last of the chill. He climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the moment he'd seen the woman fall, the decision to jump, the black water closing over his head. He thought about Michelle, about how she'd left because she couldn't handle who he'd become after leaving his old life. He thought about Travis, about building something stable and safe here in Crescent Bay. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And he thought about the woman's eyes, filled with terror and then relief. The way she'd reached for him as the ambulance doors closed. He didn't know who she was, didn't know her name or why she'd been out on a yacht in dangerous conditions. But something about the encounter had shaken loose a part of himself he'd buried, the part that acted without hesitation, that ran toward danger instead of away from it. As dawn broke over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Hunter finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that the woman he'd saved was lying awake in her hospital room, determined to find the man who'd pulled her from the depths. The morning light filtered through the hospital room curtains, casting soft shadows across the sterile white walls. Lilia Chambers lay propped against pillows, her body still aching from the night's ordeal, her mind racing with fragments of memory. The yacht's sudden lurch, the terrible grinding sound of rocks tearing through the hull, the shocking cold of the water. And then him. The man who appeared out of nowhere, who dove into freezing darkness without hesitation. At 38, Lilia had built an empire. Chambers Global Technologies was her creation, a software and AI company she'd founded 12 years ago in a cramped apartment with nothing but a laptop and relentless ambition. Now it was worth $3 billion, employed over 5,000 people, and had made her one of the youngest female CEOs in the tech industry. She was accustomed to control, to having answers, to managing every variable. But last night had stripped all of that away, leaving her vulnerable and utterly dependent on a stranger's courage. The yacht had been a celebration, or at least it was supposed to be. She'd just closed a major acquisition deal and decided to take the vessel out for a solo midnight sail. Something she did when she needed to think, to escape the constant demands of boardrooms and investors. But she'd misjudged the weather, ignored the warnings about the approaching storm, and paid for her arrogance by nearly dying on Devil's Spine. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A nurse entered, followed by a Coast Guard officer who introduced himself as Lieutenant Brennan. He was professional and courteous, asking questions about the accident for his report. Lilia answered mechanically, but her mind was elsewhere. "The man who saved me," she said when the lieutenant finished his questions. "Who was he?" Brennan consulted his notes. "Hunter Tate, local boat repair specialist. He was working late at the marina when your yacht struck the rocks, made the emergency call, and went out on his own boat to assist. Frankly, ma'am, if he hadn't acted when he did, we'd be having a very different conversation right now." "Hunter Tate," Lilia repeated, committing the name to memory. "Is he all right?" "Treated for mild hypothermia and released early this morning. Tough guy. Wouldn't accept much help." Brennan closed his notebook. "You were lucky he was there." After the lieutenant left, Lilia reached for her phone, ignoring the dozen missed calls from her assistant and board members. She typed Hunter's name into a search engine, but found little. No social media presence, no news articles, just a basic business listing for Tate Marine Services in Crescent Bay. A man who kept a low profile, which only intrigued her more. She was released from the hospital that afternoon with instructions to rest. Her assistant, Jeremy, picked her up in a company car, briefing her on damage control efforts and the media inquiries about the accident. Lilia listened with half an ear, her thoughts fixed on one objective: finding Hunter Tate and thanking him properly. "Jeremy," she interrupted his rundown of press statements. "I need you to find out everything you can about someone. Hunter Tate runs a boat repair business here in Crescent Bay." Jeremy's eyebrows rose, but he simply nodded, tapping notes into his tablet. "Of course. Should I arrange a meeting?" "No," Lilia said quickly. "Just get me his address. I'll handle this personally." By evening, she had what she needed. Hunter lived in a small cottage on the north end of town, a modest property overlooking the harbor. Lilia studied the address, then made a decision that surprised even herself. She'd go tomorrow, alone, without the usual entourage that accompanied her everywhere. This wasn't business. This was personal. Meanwhile, Hunter spent the day trying to return to normal. He worked in his shop, repairing a fishing boat's engine, but his hands felt clumsy and his concentration kept drifting. Travis had gone to classes but texted repeatedly, checking in, making sure his father was really okay. Hunter appreciated the concern, but it also reminded him how much Travis had already lost. A mother who'd abandoned them. Stability shattered by choices Hunter had made years ago. Around 6 p.m., as he was closing up the shop, a sleek black sedan pulled into the gravel lot. Hunter tensed instinctively, old reflexes kicking in. The door opened and a woman stepped out, and for a moment he didn't recognize her. She wore dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. But then he saw her eyes. Those same dark eyes that had looked at him with terror and gratitude from the freezing water. "Mr. Tate?" she said, approaching slowly. Her voice was steady but held an underlying vulnerability. "I'm Lilia Chambers. You saved my life last night." Hunter wiped his hands on a rag, suddenly aware of the oil stains on his work shirt, the state of his small shop compared to the obvious wealth she represented. "Just did what needed doing. Glad you're all right." Lilia stopped a few feet away, studying him with an intensity that made Hunter uncomfortable. "What you did was extraordinary. You dove into freezing water in the middle of a storm. The doctor said another few minutes, and I would have..." Her voice caught. I wanted to thank you in person." "No thanks necessary," Hunter said, keeping his tone neutral. He'd learned long ago that gratitude could turn into curiosity, and curiosity into questions he didn't want to answer. "You should get home, rest up. Hypothermia is no joke. Neither is risking your own life for a complete stranger," Lilia countered. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "Please, at least accept this. It's not enough, but—" Hunter held up a hand. "I don't want your money, Miss Chambers." Lilia blinked, clearly not used to being refused. "I'm not trying to insult you. I just want to do something, anything, to show my appreciation." "You just did," Hunter said, his voice softening slightly. "You came here yourself. That's enough." They stood in awkward silence, the evening breeze carrying the scent of the ocean between them. Lilia looked around the shop, taking in the worn tools, the modest workspace, the life so different from her own. Something in her expression shifted, from discomfort to genuine curiosity. "Can I at least buy you coffee?" she asked. "There's a diner down the road. I saw it on the way here." Every instinct told Hunter to say no, to maintain the distance he'd worked so hard to create around his life. But something about her earnestness, the vulnerability still lingering in her eyes, made him hesitate. He thought of Travis, who'd encouraged him more than once to stop hiding from the world. "All right," he said finally. "One coffee, but I'm buying." Lilia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Deal." They walked to the diner, a local place called Rosie's that had been serving the same menu for 30 years. The interior was warm and worn, red vinyl booths and a counter lined with stools. They slid into a booth by the window, and a waitress named Donna, who'd known Hunter since he first arrived in Crescent Bay, brought coffee without being asked. "You're famous now, Hunter," Donna said with a wink. "Whole town's talking about your heroics last night." Hunter groaned softly. "It wasn't heroics, Donna. Just happened to be there." Donna said, clearly unconvinced. She turned to Lilia with a warm smile. "You're a lucky woman. This one doesn't talk much, but he's got a heart bigger than the Pacific." After Donna left, Lilia wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "Small town," she observed. "That's why I like it," Hunter said. "People know each other. Look out for each other." "Different from my world," Lilia admitted. "I run a tech company, Chambers Global Technologies. We're based in Seattle, but I travel constantly. Last night I took my yacht out because I needed space to think. Made some stupid decisions about the weather and—" She stopped, her fingers tightening on the mug. "I'm not used to losing control. It terrified me." Hunter studied her, seeing past the polished exterior to the person underneath. Control's an illusion anyway. Life has a way of reminding us of that. "Sounds like you're speaking from experience," Lilia said carefully. Hunter took a long sip of coffee, weighing how much to share. "I am. Had a different life before this. Different career. It fell apart, took my marriage with it. Came here 5 years ago with my son, looking for something quieter." "Your son," Lilia said. "How old?" 18. "Travis. He's the reason I keep going." Hunter's expression softened. His mom left when things got hard. So it's been just us. This town, this work, it's simple, honest. That's what we needed. Lilia nodded slowly. "I understand running from something. I built my company from nothing, worked myself nearly to death, proving I belonged in a world that didn't want me there. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started. Last night, when I was in that water," her voice dropped. I realized how much of my life I've spent alone. By choice, because trusting people got me hurt before. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Hunter saw his own isolation reflected in her words, the walls they'd both built for different reasons. He wanted to retreat, to keep the conversation surface level. But Travis's voice echoed in his mind. You can't hide forever, Dad. There's a reason people build walls, Hunter said quietly. Usually because something got through once and did damage. Yes, Lilia agreed. Exactly that. They sat in comfortable silence, the diner's warm atmosphere wrapping around them. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. When they finally left, walking back toward the shop where Lilia's car waited, the awkwardness from earlier had dissipated into something easier. Thank you for the coffee, Lilia said, and for last night, and for this, for treating me like a person instead of a checkbook. Hunter smiled slightly. That's all any of us are in the end. Just people trying to get by. Lilia hesitated at her car door. Would it be all right if I came back? Maybe helped around the shop or something? I'm in town for a few weeks while they salvage the yacht and... She paused, vulnerability flickering across her face. I don't have many friends. Colleagues, employees, but not friends. You seem like someone worth knowing. Hunter should have said no. Should have kept his life simple, uncomplicated. But he found himself nodding. Shops open most days, can always use an extra hand, even if you don't know port from starboard. Lilia laughed, the sound genuine and lighter than before. I'll learn. She drove away as dusk settled over Crescent Bay, leaving Hunter standing in the lot with the taste of coffee on his tongue and a sense that something had shifted. He locked up the shop and headed home, where Travis was waiting with dinner, takeout from the local Chinese place. So? Travis said immediately. The woman from last night showed up, didn't she? Mrs. Chen from the market called. Said she saw you two at Rosie's. Hunter sighed. Small towns. Dad, come on, tell me. Her name's Lilia. She wanted to say thanks. We had coffee, that's it. Hunter grabbed a plate, loading it with fried rice. Travis grinned. That's not it, and you know it. You actually talked to someone. That's huge. Don't make a big deal out of this, Trav. Too late, Travis said cheerfully. I like her already. Anyone who gets you to leave the shop for coffee is all right in my book. Hunter shook his head, but couldn't quite suppress a smile. As they ate, he told Travis about the rescue in more detail, leaving out the parts that still made his heart race. Travis listened, his expression shifting from amusement to pride. You're a good man, Dad, Travis said when Hunter finished. I know things were rough before we came here. I know Mom leaving hurt both of us. But you did something incredible last night. Don't downplay it. Just did what anyone. No, Travis interrupted firmly. Not anyone. You. Because that's who you are. Later, alone in his room, Hunter stood at the window overlooking the harbor. The lights of the marina twinkled in the darkness, and somewhere out there, Devil's Spine lurked beneath the waves. He thought about Lilia, about the way she'd looked at him with something more than gratitude. With recognition, maybe, of someone else carrying wounds. He didn't know what would come of her return visits, if anything. But for the first time in 5 years, Hunter felt a crack in the careful isolation he'd built. It wasn't fear exactly, but it wasn't quite hope either. Something in between, fragile and uncertain, like the first light of dawn breaking over troubled waters. 3 days passed before Lilia returned to Tate Marine Services, and when she did, she came prepared. Gone was the designer wardrobe. Instead, she wore practical jeans, work boots, and a canvas jacket that looked recently purchased. Her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid, and she carried a thermos of coffee and a bag of pastries from the local bakery. Hunter looked up from the engine he was rebuilding, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Didn't think you'd actually come back." "I keep my word," Lilia said, setting the coffee and pastries on his workbench. "Plus, I meant what I said. I want to learn. And—" She hesitated, a vulnerability creeping into her voice. "I could use the distraction." Hunter studied her, noting the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. The aftermath of trauma wore different masks, but he recognized it well enough. "Fair enough. You ever work with tools before? Does a screwdriver count?" "It's a start." Hunter wiped his hands on a rag. "We'll begin simple. That sailboat over there needs its hull sanded and refinished. Tedious work, but good for thinking." They spent the morning working side by side, Hunter showing her the proper technique for sanding with the grain, the patience required to do it right. Lilia threw herself into the task with surprising intensity, her corporate perfectionism translating well to manual labor. They worked in companionable silence, the rasp of sandpaper and the distant cry of seagulls the only sounds. Around noon, they took a break, sitting on overturned buckets with the coffee and pastries between them. The November sun broke through clouds, warming the air slightly. Hunter noticed Lilia flexing her hands, the unaccustomed work leaving them sore. "You'll build calluses," he said. "Takes time." "Good," Lilia replied. "I spend too much time in boardrooms. This feels real." "What's your company do exactly?" Hunter asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his usual reserve. "We develop AI systems for logistics and supply chain management. Boring to most people, but it's revolutionized how companies move goods around the world." She took a sip of coffee. "I started it 12 years ago with my best friend from college, Natasha. We were both broke, working out of my apartment, living on ramen and ambition." "What happened to your friend?" Lilia's expression darkened. "Natasha died 4 years ago. Car accident. She was the creative one, the dreamer. I was the business mind. After she passed, I threw myself even deeper into the company. It's how I cope. Work until I can't think anymore." Hunter heard the echo of his own grief in her words. "I get that. After my ex-wife left, after everything fell apart, I did the same thing. Just kept moving, kept my hands busy. Figured if I stopped, I'd have to feel it all. And now?" Lilia asked softly. "Still working on it," Hunter admitted. "My son helps. He's applying to colleges now, wants to study engineering. Smart kid. Better than I deserve." "I doubt that," Lilia said firmly. "From what I've seen, you're exactly what he needs." They returned to work, but the conversation had opened a door. Over the following days, Lilia became a regular presence at the shop, arriving each morning with coffee and staying until afternoon. Hunter found himself looking forward to her visits. The way she asked questions without prying, the quick intelligence that let her grasp concepts rapidly. She had a CEO's mind, but approached the manual work with humility, willing to get dirty and make mistakes. On the 5th day, as they worked on replacing a boat's corroded wiring, Lilia finally brought up the topic Hunter had been waiting for. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice carrying the tone of someone about to make a business pitch. "About who I am, beyond the yacht incident." Hunter set down his wire cutters. "All right. Chambers Global Technologies is worth $3 billion. I own 60% of it. I have homes in Seattle, San Francisco, and New York. I employ 5,000 people, and last year I was on the cover of Fortune magazine as one of the top 50 CEOs under 40. She paused, watching his reaction. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you saved, and because I don't want there to be secrets between us if we're going to be friends. Hunter absorbed this information, noting how uncomfortable she looked delivering it. That why you were sailing alone? Too much weight on your shoulders. Part of it, Lily admitted. The other part is that I don't trust easily. I built this company from nothing, and along the way, I learned that people want things from me. Access, money, connections. It's exhausting, constantly wondering what someone's angle is. I don't have an angle, Hunter said quietly. I fix boats, I raise my son. That's my life. I know, Lilia said, her expression softening. That's why I keep coming back. You're the first person in years who's treated me like just another human being. Hunter returned to the wiring, threading a new connection. Money doesn't change what happened that night. You were drowning. I could help, so I did. The rest, your company, your homes, that's your business. Doesn't make you more or less worth saving. Lilia's eyes glistened suddenly, and she looked away, busying herself with organizing tools. Thank you, she said, her voice thick. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. They worked in silence for a while, the revelation settling between them. Hunter felt the weight of it, not the money itself, but the trust she'd placed in him by sharing it. In his experience, vulnerability was a rare gift, not given lightly. That evening, after Lilia left, Travis came by the shop to walk home with his father. He'd been doing that more, often since the rescue, an unspoken concern that Hunter didn't entirely discourage. She's back again, Travis observed, gesturing to the 2 coffee cups on the workbench. She likes learning, Hunter said neutrally. Dad, come on. She's clearly into you. Hunter shot his son a look. It's not like that. She's dealing with stuff, same as anyone. Sure, Travis said, grinning. That's why she drives 45 minutes each way to sand boats, because of the therapeutic value. Leave it alone, Trav. But Travis's words stuck with Hunter as they walked home. He thought about Lilia's visits, the way their conversations had deepened, moving from surface pleasantries to genuine exchanges. He'd told her things about his past he rarely shared, not the full story, but glimpses. The failed marriage, the reasons they'd come to Crescent Bay, the careful rebuilding of a life after losing everything. And she'd listened without judgment, offering her own stories in return. The lonely climb to success, the friend she'd lost, the emptiness that came with achievement when there was no one to share it with. At home, Hunter found himself pulling out an old photo album he kept hidden in the back of a closet. Pictures of him and Michelle before everything fell apart. Him and Travis as a baby. The family they'd almost been. He stared at his younger self, barely recognizing the man in those images. Confident, unburdened, full of a certainty that life had thoroughly beaten out of him. His phone buzzed with a text from Lilia. Thank you for today, for listening, for not treating me differently. See you tomorrow? Hunter stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to establish boundaries, to keep this relationship firmly in the category of casual friendship. But a larger part, the part that had felt more alive these past few days than in 5 years, typed back, Shop opens at 8. Bring that good coffee. Her response came immediately. Deal? And Hunter, you're a good friend. I'm lucky I crashed my yacht near your marina. Hunter smiled despite himself. Lucky is one word for it. See you tomorrow, Lilia. He set the phone down and returned to the album. But the photos looked different now. Not markers of failure, but evidence of a life lived. He'd survived the storm, built something new, and raised a son who was turning into a remarkable young man. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for something else too. Not romance necessarily, that felt too complicated, too risky. But connection, real connection, with someone who understood the weight of rebuilding after catastrophe. Outside, the November rain began to fall, gentle and steady. Hunter closed the album and put it away. But this time, he didn't shove it to the back of the closet. He left it on the shelf, accessible, a reminder that the past didn't have to be a prison. Across town, in the luxury suite she'd rented while overseeing the yacht salvage, Leah stood at the window overlooking Crescent Bay's harbor. The lights of the marina twinkled through the rain, and somewhere among them was Hunter's modest shop. She thought about his calloused hands, the quiet competence in everything he did, the way he'd listened to her confession about wealth without flinching or changing how he treated her. In her world, relationships were transactions. Business deals dressed up as friendships, networking disguised as camaraderie. But Hunter was different, authentic in a way she'd forgotten people could be. And for the first time since Natasha's death, Lilia felt the walls around her heart developing cracks. Her phone rang, her assistant with the inevitable list of urgent matters requiring her attention. Lilia answered, handling each issue with her usual efficiency, but her mind kept drifting to tomorrow morning, to coffee at the shop, to the comfortable rhythm she and Hunter were developing, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, diving into freezing water had saved more than just her life. Maybe it had saved them both. The coastal town of Crescent Bay transformed as December arrived, strung with holiday lights that reflected off the dark harbor water. Hunter Tate found himself in an unfamiliar rhythm. Mornings still began with work at the marina, but now they included Lilia Chambers arriving promptly at 8. 2 cups of expensive coffee in hand, ready to learn whatever he'd teach her that day. What had started as gratitude had evolved into something neither of them had quite named yet. Today they were working on a classic wooden speedboat, a 1960s Chris craft that belonged to a local retired banker. The varnish had deteriorated badly, requiring careful stripping and refinishing. Hunter demonstrated the technique, his movements practiced and sure, while Lilia watched with the focused attention she'd once reserved for board presentations. "The grain tells you everything," Hunter explained, running his hand along the mahogany planking. "You work with it, not against it. Force it, and you'll tear the wood. Respect it, and you get something beautiful." Lilia picked up a scraper and began working on a section he'd cleared for her. "Is that a metaphor?" "Maybe," Hunter said with a hint of a smile. "Seems like everything's a metaphor when you spend enough time thinking. You do a lot of that. Thinking? Too much, probably. Travis says I overthink everything." Hunter moved to the opposite side of the boat, giving her space to work. He's not wrong. They fell into their comfortable pattern, working in companionable silence, broken by occasional questions or observations. Hunter had learned that Lilia processed stress through conversation. She'd talk through problems out loud, working them out verbally in a way that reminded him of how he worked through mechanical issues. Today her mind was on her company. "My board wants me back in Seattle full-time," she said, carefully scraping varnish. "They're getting nervous with me, being remote. Think I'm losing focus." "Are you?" Hunter asked without judgment. "Maybe," Lilia admitted. "But not in the way they think. I'm gaining perspective. These past 2 weeks working here, learning actual skills with my hands, talking to people in town. It's reminded me why I started the company in the first place. Natasha and I wanted to build something meaningful, not just profitable. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that distinction. Hunter paused his work, studying her. Over the past weeks, he'd watched her transformation from the polished CEO into someone more grounded, more present. Her hands now bore small calluses and the occasional cut from learning tool work. She wore her hair in simple ponytails instead of styled perfection. She laughed more easily. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm thinking about restructuring, promoting my COO to handle day-to-day operations while I focus on long-term vision and research. It's what I'm actually good at, seeing where technology is heading, not managing quarterly reports." She looked up from her work. "It would mean more flexibility. I could split time between Seattle and here." The word "here" hung in the air between them, weighted with implication. Hunter felt his chest tighten with something between hope and fear. He'd grown accustomed to her presence, looked forward to their mornings together. But the thought of her making decisions around his small town, his small life, brought all his old insecurities rushing back. "That's a big change," he said carefully. "Your board might not like it." "They'll adjust," Lilia said with the quiet confidence of someone who'd built an empire. "I still own controlling shares. Besides, I'm not asking permission. I'm informing them of my decision." She set down her scraper, meeting his eyes. "Unless you'd rather I didn't. If my being here is becoming complicated—" "No," Hunter interrupted, surprising himself with the quickness of his response. "I mean, it's your decision, but I don't mind you being around." Lilia smiled, something warm and genuine that made her look younger. "That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in years." They returned to work, but something had shifted. An acknowledgement of what was building between them, still unspoken, but increasingly difficult to ignore. Around noon, Travis showed up at the shop with sandwiches from the deli, a habit he'd developed since Lilia started coming around. Hunter suspected his son had ulterior motives, namely matchmaking, but appreciated the gesture anyway. "Miss Chambers," Travis said with exaggerated formality that made Lilia laugh. "Please, it's Lilia. Miss Chambers makes me sound like a schoolteacher." "My dad says you run a huge tech company," Travis said, settling onto a workbench. "That's pretty amazing." "It's a lot of work," Lilia said, accepting the sandwich Travis offered. "What about you? Your dad mentioned you're applying to colleges." Travis launched into an enthusiastic explanation of his engineering program applications, his face animated in a way that made Hunter's heart swell with pride. Lilia listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions about his projects and goals. Hunter watched them interact, struck by how naturally she connected with his son, without condescension or the awkwardness many adults showed around teenagers. "Your dad's being modest about his own background," Lilia said to Travis. "He's got serious skills. This isn't just boat repair, it's craftsmanship, art, really." Travis grinned. "I keep telling him that, but he won't listen to me." "That's because you're supposed to think I'm embarrassing," Hunter said dryly. "It's in the parent-teenager contract. You're only embarrassing about 30% of the time." Travis countered. "That's pretty good for a dad." They ate together, the conversation flowing easily between work talk, Travis's college plans, and Lilia's stories about her early days building the company. She had a gift for storytelling, Hunter noticed, making even technical business details engaging. Travis hung on every word, and Hunter found himself doing the same. After Travis left to head to his afternoon job at the hardware store, Lilia helped Hunter clean up the workspace. The afternoon sun slanted through the shop windows, casting everything in golden light. "He's a great young man," Lilia said. "You've done an amazing job raising him." "Had a lot of help from this town," Hunter said. "People here looked out for us when we arrived. Gave me work, gave Travis friends. It's a good place." "I can see that," Lilia said softly. She hesitated, then added, "Can I ask you something personal?" Hunter's shoulders tensed reflexively, but he nodded. "Go ahead." "What did you do before? You've mentioned having a different career, but you've never said what it was." Hunter set down the rag he'd been holding, the question hanging heavy between them. He'd known it would come eventually. Lilia was too perceptive not to sense there was more to his story. The question was how much to share, how much to trust. "I worked in security," he said finally, choosing his words carefully. "Private sector, high-risk situations. It was intense, demanding, and eventually it broke something in me. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be that person. When I left, my marriage couldn't survive the change. Michelle needed the man I'd been, not the one I was becoming. So she left, and Travis and I came here to start over." It was the most he'd shared about his past with anyone in Crescent Bay, besides the bare essentials. Lilia absorbed this information quietly, her expression thoughtful but not judgmental. "That takes courage," she said. "Walking away from something you were good at because it was destroying you. Most people can't do that." "Didn't feel like courage at the time," Hunter admitted. "Felt like failure. Still does sometimes." "It wasn't," Lilia said firmly. She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I know something about sacrificing yourself for work. After Natasha died, I nearly worked myself to death. 16, 18-hour days, never taking breaks. Because if I stopped moving, I'd have to feel the loss. My assistant eventually staged an intervention, threatened to quit if I didn't take time off. That's what led to me buying the yacht. Forced relaxation, except I'm terrible at it. Hence sailing into a storm at midnight," Hunter said with a slight smile. "Hence that, yes." Lilia returned the smile, but sadness lingered in her eyes. "Natasha was more than my business partner. She was my best friend, the sister I never had. We met in college, both of us broke and ambitious, and we built something incredible together. When she died, it felt like half of me died too. The company was our baby, and suddenly I was raising it alone." Hunter understood that kind of loss, the way it hollowed you out and changed the shape of everything that came after. "You honor her by keeping it going," he said, "by making it matter." "I try," Lilia whispered, "but some days it feels impossible, like I'm just going through the motions, maintaining something without understanding why anymore." They stood close now. The shop's ambient sounds, the lap of water against hulls, the distant cry of gulls, creating a pocket of privacy. Hunter felt the pull between them, the recognition of shared wounds, shared understanding. He'd built walls around himself for so long, convincing himself that isolation was safety. But Lilia was showing him that maybe, just maybe, connection could be healing too. "For what it's worth," Hunter said quietly, "I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. You walked away from your routine, came to a place where nobody knows your name or your company, and you learned something completely new. That takes strength." Lilia's eyes brightened with unshed tears. "It's easier here, with you. You don't expect me to be anything other than who I am in this moment. Do you know how rare that is?" Hunter did know. In his old life, everyone had expectations. Mission parameters, performance standards, results that mattered more than the cost. Here in Crescent Bay, he'd built a life where the only expectation was honest work and showing up for his son. It was simple, and that simplicity had saved him. "We're a pair, aren't we?" he said with a rueful smile, both running from pasts that wouldn't let us go, trying to figure out how to live with the ghosts. "Maybe we don't have to run anymore," Lilia suggested. "Maybe we've run far enough." The moment stretched between them, intimate and fragile. Hunter wanted to close the distance, to offer comfort beyond words, but old caution held him back. It was too soon, too complicated. They were still learning each other, still carrying too much unhealed hurt. As if sensing his hesitation, Lilia stepped back, breaking the tension with a gentle smile. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. I know it wasn't easy to share." "Getting easier," Hunter admitted. "You make it easier." They returned to work on the Chris craft, but something fundamental had shifted. They'd moved past polite friendship into territory that was deeper, more vulnerable. The rest of the afternoon passed in comfortable collaboration, their hands working in unspoken coordination that came from growing familiarity. As the sun began its descent toward the Pacific, Lilia packed up her things, reluctant as always to leave, but needing to handle business calls before the East Coast closed for the day. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked at her car. "I'll be here," Hunter said. "Bring that good coffee." "Always." She paused, her hand on the car door. "Hunter, I'm glad I crashed near your marina. Luckiest disaster of my life." He watched her drive away, the taillights disappearing into the early winter dusk. Back in the shop, he stood looking at the Chris craft, its stripped wood grain visible in the work lights. Tomorrow they'd begin the refinishing process, building up layers of varnish that would protect and beautify the wood beneath. It occurred to Hunter that he and Lilia were doing something similar. Carefully, slowly, building layers of trust and understanding over the damaged parts of themselves. It was painstaking work, requiring patience and care. But like the boat, the result might be something beautiful, something worth the effort. His phone buzzed with a text from Travis. "Smooth moves today, Dad. She likes you. Don't mess it up." Hunter shook his head, but couldn't suppress his smile. His son had always been perceptive, seeing things Hunter tried to hide even from himself. Maybe especially from himself. That night, lying in bed with the sound of waves in the distance, Hunter allowed himself to imagine possibilities he'd foreclosed years ago. A life that included more than just work and single parenthood. Someone to share the quiet moments with, who understood both the weight of the past and the hope of building something new. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But for the first time in 5 years, Hunter thought maybe, just maybe, he was ready to try. The December rain arrived with force, transforming Crescent Bay into a study of gray. Gray skies, gray water, the world reduced to shades of mist and motion. Hunter stood in his shop watching the downpour, a mug of coffee warming his hands. When Lilia's car pulled into the lot, she emerged with her hood up, laughing at the futility of staying dry, and dashed through the rain to the shop entrance. "Miserable out there," she said, shaking water from her jacket. "But I brought reinforcements." She held up a bag from the bakery and her thermos. "If we're going to work in this weather, we need proper fuel." "Smart thinking," Hunter agreed, taking the bag. Inside were fresh cinnamon rolls, still warm. "You're learning the important life skills." They'd fallen into this rhythm over the past 3 weeks. Easy banter, comfortable silences. The kind of connection that felt both new and strangely inevitable. Today's project was different from their usual work, though. Hunter had mentioned needing to organize his storage room, a cluttered space filled with parts, tools, and accumulated debris from 5 years of running the shop. Lilia had volunteered immediately, saying she had a talent for systems and organization. "Fair warning," Hunter said, leading her to the back room. "It's bad. I've been meaning to deal with it for years, but kept putting it off." He opened the door, and Lilia surveyed the chaos. Shelves overflowing with marine parts, boxes stacked haphazardly, tools mixed with old paperwork and forgotten equipment. To Hunter's surprise, her face lit up. "Oh, this is perfect," she said with genuine enthusiasm. "I love organizing. It's like solving a puzzle." She pulled out her phone. "Mind if I take some photos? I'll create a system." "Have at it," Hunter said, bemused by her excitement over what he considered a nightmare. They spent the morning pulling everything out, sorting items into categories on the shop floor. The work was physical and mindless in the best way, allowing conversation to flow naturally. Lilia told stories about her early days with Natasha, the chaos of their first office, the near disasters that became company legends. Hunter found himself sharing more about his work before Crescent Bay, carefully editing out the dangerous details but conveying the intensity, the toll it took. Around midday, Hunter reached into an old file box, and his hand closed on something unexpected. He pulled out a photograph, its edges worn, colors slightly faded. The image stopped him cold. It showed him in his early 30s, standing with Michelle and baby Travis, all of them smiling at a beach somewhere. Hunter barely recognized himself. Younger, leaner, with an ease in his posture that had long since disappeared. Michelle looked happy, her arm around his waist, their whole lives ahead of them, before everything fell apart. "That's your family," Lilia said softly, appearing at his shoulder. Travis was adorable. "He was about 6 months old here," Hunter said, his voice rough. "We'd gone to the coast for a weekend before work got crazy. Before I became someone Michelle couldn't recognize anymore." Lilia studied the photo, then his face. "What happened? I mean, you don't have to tell me if—" "No, it's okay," Hunter interrupted. He moved to sit on a cleared workbench, still holding the photograph. "I worked in private security, like I mentioned. High-risk protection details mostly. The money was incredible, but it changed me. Made me paranoid, always scanning for threats, unable to relax." Michelle tried to understand. But how could she? I couldn't tell her half of what I dealt with. He paused, the memories sharp even after all these years. "There was an incident. A client got hurt on my watch, someone I was supposed to protect. It wasn't my fault. The investigation cleared me. But it broke something inside. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't live with the weight of other people's lives in my hands. Couldn't be the person that job required." Lilia sat beside him, close but not touching, her presence a steady anchor. "So you walked away?" "Yeah. Michelle begged me to reconsider, said we needed the income, that I was throwing away everything we'd built. But I couldn't go back. The person that job made me, I didn't like him. Didn't want Travis growing up with that as a father." Hunter's grip tightened on the photo. "Michelle stuck it out for a couple of years, hoping I'd change my mind. When it became clear I wouldn't, she left. Said she married one man but ended up with a stranger." "She was wrong," Lilia said firmly. "You chose your son over money and prestige. That's not becoming a stranger. That's becoming a better man." Hunter looked at her, searching for pity or judgment, but found only understanding. "You really believe that?" "Absolutely," Lilia said. I've spent years watching people compromise their values for success. You did the opposite. That takes more courage than most people ever find." They sat in silence, the rain drumming on the roof, the photograph between them. Finally, Hunter stood, looking at the image one more time before tucking it into his shirt pocket. "Thank you. For listening. For not thinking I'm broken?" Lilia supplied gently. "Hunter, we're all carrying damage. The question is what we do with it. You rebuilt your life around being a good father. That's not broken. That's heroic." The word settled over him, uncomfortable but somehow right. He'd never thought of his choices as heroic, only necessary. But maybe there was courage in walking away, in choosing the harder path because it was the right one. They returned to organizing, but the conversation had opened something between them. As they worked, Lilia began sharing her own story with new depth. She told Hunter about her childhood in a trailer park outside Portland, about sewing clothes with her mother to sell at flea markets, about the determination that drove her to get scholarships to college. "Natasha came from money," Lilia explained, arranging tools on a newly cleared shelf. "Her family thought our friendship was charity work, her slumming with the poor scholarship student. But she never saw it that way. She saw a partner, an equal. We built the company with her family's investment, but I made sure I maintained majority control. Couldn't afford to lose myself in someone else's vision." "Smart," Hunter said. "How'd she die, if you don't mind me asking?" Lilia's hand stilled on the wrench she was holding. "Drunk driver. She was coming home from a late meeting, driving through downtown Seattle. The other driver ran a red light going 60 miles an hour. She died instantly." Her voice cracked. "I got the call at 2 a.m., threw up in my office bathroom, then went back to work because I didn't know what else to do." Hunter set down the box he was carrying and moved to her side. This time, he didn't hesitate. He pulled her into a hug, letting her collapse against his chest as years of compressed grief finally broke free. She sobbed into his shirt, her whole body shaking, and he held her steady, one hand stroking her back in unconscious comfort. "I never got to say goodbye," Lilia gasped between sobs. "We'd argued that morning about expanding into international markets. I told her she was being reckless, that we needed to consolidate first. Our last words were an argument about quarterly projections, and then she was gone." "She knew you loved her," Hunter said softly. "Arguments don't erase that. They're just part of caring about someone enough to disagree." Lilia pulled back, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart on you. Don't apologize. I spent 2 years not crying after Michelle left, thinking it made me strong. All it did was lock everything inside until I could barely feel anything." He offered her his handkerchief, a gesture that made her laugh through her tears. "You carry a handkerchief? That's the most old-fashioned thing ever." "Blame my dad. He said a man should always have one for when someone needs it." Hunter smiled. Guess he was right. They took a break, sitting on the shop floor with fresh coffee, the organization project forgotten for the moment. Outside, the rain eased into a gentle drizzle, the gray world softening. "Can I show you something?" Lilia asked, pulling out her phone. She navigated to a photo album and handed the device to Hunter. "That's Natasha and me, the day we signed our first major client." The photo showed 2 young women, maybe 25, grinning maniacally in a cramped office. Lilia looked different, thinner, her hair longer, dressed in what was clearly her nicest business outfit that still wasn't quite professional enough. But her eyes held the same intelligence, the same determination. "You both look so happy," Hunter observed. "We were," terrified but happy. That contract kept us afloat for another year, gave us time to develop the product that made everything else possible. Lilia scrolled to more photos. Natasha at their first office party, Natasha presenting at a conference, Natasha and Lilia on a beach somewhere tropical, both sunburned and laughing. She was beautiful, Hunter said. Inside and out. Lilia agreed. She used to say that success without kindness was just wealth. She kept me grounded, reminded me why we were building the company. After she died, I lost that compass. Just chased growth for its own sake, trying to outrun the grief. Hunter handed back the phone, understanding in his bones what she meant. Is that why you took the yacht out that night? Running from it? Maybe. I just closed a deal that would have made Natasha so proud, but she wasn't there to celebrate with. So I took the boat out, thinking the ocean would clear my head. Instead, I nearly joined her. Lilia's voice dropped. And then you saved me. Gave me a second chance I'm not sure I deserved. Everyone deserves a second chance, Hunter said firmly. We've all got regrets, things we wish we'd done differently. But you're still here, still able to honor her memory. That matters. They returned to organizing with renewed purpose, the shared vulnerability creating a deeper bond. As afternoon faded toward evening, the storage room transformed. Shelves labeled and organized, tools arranged by type and size, boxes clearly marked. Lilia had created a digital inventory system on her phone, promising to email him a spreadsheet. This is incredible, Hunter said, surveying their work. Would have taken me months to do alone. That's what friends are for, Lilia said, then hesitated. We are friends, right? I mean, I know I initially came here out of gratitude, but it's become more than that. You're important to me. Hunter felt his chest tighten with emotion. He'd locked away for too long. Yeah, we're friends. Good friends. You're important to me too. They stood in the transformed space, the photograph still in Hunter's pocket, Natasha's memory fresh in both their minds. The rain had stopped completely now, late afternoon sun breaking through clouds to paint everything golden. Thank you, Hunter said, for helping with this, for listening, for being here. Thank you for letting me, Lilia replied, for trusting me with your story, for showing me that it's okay to still hurt, to still carry the past while building something new. As Lilia prepared to leave, Hunter walked her to her car. The air smelled clean and rain-washed, the harbor reflecting the breaking sunlight. She paused at the driver's door, turning back to him. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Always, Hunter confirmed. Bring that good coffee. And maybe more cinnamon rolls, Lilia added with a smile that reached her eyes this time, genuine and warm. Hunter watched her drive away, then returned to the shop. He pulled out the photograph, studying it in the golden light. The man in that picture had been lost for a long time. But maybe, just maybe, Hunter was finding his way back to something like him. Not the same. Too much had changed for that. But someone who could feel again, who could trust again, who could let someone in without fear of losing himself in the process. He placed the photo on a newly organized shelf, visible but not hidden. A reminder of where he'd been and how far he'd come. And tomorrow, when Lilia arrived with coffee and her easy smile, they'd continue building this unexpected friendship that was starting to feel like something more. Something neither of them had names for yet, but both were beginning to recognize as essential. The Crescent Bay Winter Festival arrived with the kind of crisp December weather that made the Oregon coast magical. Clear skies, sharp air, and the smell of wood smoke drifting from chimneys throughout town. Hunter had lived through 5 of these festivals, usually observing from the margins, helping with boat-related setup, but avoiding the social aspects. This year felt different, though, because Lilia had convinced him to actually participate. It's a community event, she'd argued 2 weeks ago while they worked on refinishing the Chris craft. You're part of this community. Travis is going to be there. I'll be there. You should come. I don't do crowds well, Hunter had countered weakly. You dove into freezing water at midnight, Lilia had replied with a raised eyebrow. I think you can handle a small-town festival. So here he was, standing in the town square that had been transformed into a winter marketplace. Local vendors sold handmade crafts, the volunteer fire department served hot chocolate, and a stage hosted various performers throughout the day. Travis was working the hardware store's booth, demonstrating tools to curious customers with the easy charm he'd inherited from his mother. Lilia stood beside Hunter, bundled in a thick coat, her eyes bright with genuine excitement. This is wonderful, she said, surveying the scene. Seattle has big events, but nothing with this kind of authentic community feeling. Wait until you taste Mrs. Patterson's fudge, Hunter said. It's legendary. They wandered through the market, Lilia stopping frequently to admire handmade items or chat with vendors who'd become familiar faces during her weeks in Crescent Bay. Hunter noticed how naturally she fit in, how the town had embraced her despite, or perhaps because of, her willingness to show up at his shop every day and learn boat repair with genuine enthusiasm. Near the center of the square, a booth caught Hunter's attention. It was run by Veteran Support Services, offering information about resources for former military and security personnel. A man stood behind the table, probably in his 60s, wearing a cap that identified him as Navy veteran. Something about his posture, the way he scanned the crowd, registered familiarity with Hunter. You okay? Lilia asked, noticing his hesitation. Yeah, just give me a minute. Hunter approached the booth, and the older man's eyes sharpened with recognition of a kindred spirit. See, you've got the look, the man said, extending a hand. Name's Carl Winters, retired Navy, been running this program for 10 years. Hunter Tate, Hunter replied, shaking his hand. Private security, retired. Carl's expression shifted to understanding. Tough transition, private sector. A lot of guys struggle with it. You doing all right? The question, asked without judgment or presumption, loosened something in Hunter's chest. Better now than I was. Took some time to find my footing. That's what we're here for, Carl said, gesturing to the brochures on his table. Support groups, counseling referrals, job resources. Whatever folks need to bridge from that life to this one. He paused, studying Hunter. You look familiar, though. Can't place it. Before Hunter could respond, an older woman approached the booth, her weathered face lighting up when she saw him. Hunter Tate? Oh, my lord, it is you. Hunter turned, surprised, and found himself face to face with Eleanor Martinez, a woman he vaguely remembered from his early days in Crescent Bay. She was in her 70s now, still spry, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Martinez, Hunter said, searching his memory. How are you? Alive, thanks to you, Eleanor said emphatically. She turned to Lilia and Carl. This man saved my life 7 years ago. I was stranded on Highway 101 in a snowstorm, car broken down, no way to call for help. He stopped, fixed my car right there in the freezing cold, wouldn't take a penny, told me to pay it forward. Hunter felt his face flush. It was just a loose battery cable, nothing major. Nothing major? Eleanor's voice rose. I have diabetes. If I'd been stuck out there another hour in that cold, I could have gone into shock. You didn't just fix my car, young man. You saved my life. She gripped his arm with surprising strength. I've been telling that story for 7 years, hoping to find you again and thank you properly. Lilia was watching this exchange with an expression Hunter couldn't quite read. Carl looked between them with growing interest. Wait, Carl said suddenly. 7 years ago, Route 12, disabled truck in a rainstorm. That was you too, wasn't it? Hunter's stomach dropped. It was, Carl said with certainty. I was the one in that truck. Transmission gave out, middle of nowhere, pouring rain. A guy in a beat-up pickup stopped, spent 2 hours in the mud getting me mobile again. Told me his name was Tate. That was right after you moved here, wasn't it? The pieces were falling into place, and Hunter wanted nothing more than to disappear. Lilia's hand found his, squeezing gently, anchoring him as more people began gathering around Eleanor's animated retelling. There's more, Eleanor continued to the growing crowd. My granddaughter Sarah, some of you know her, teaches at the elementary school. She had car trouble 5 years back. Dead battery in the school parking lot. Hunter showed up before any of us even knew she needed help, jumped her car, and made sure she got home safe. He's been quietly looking after this town for years. A man Hunter recognized as the bank manager spoke up. He fixed my son's boat motor for free when my boy was saving up for college. Said every kid should know how to work with their hands. He cleared Mrs. Henderson's driveway every time it snowed that bad winter. Someone else added. Never asked for thanks or payment. The stories multiplied. People calling out memories of Hunter's quiet acts of kindness over 5 years. Each one was something he'd forgotten or dismissed as insignificant. Helping a tourist with directions, repairing a dock for an elderly fisherman, teaching teenagers basic boat safety. Small things that to him had felt like common decency, but to the recipients had been meaningful help in moments of need. Hunter stood frozen, overwhelmed by the collective memory of his own actions. He'd been so focused on hiding, on keeping his head down and not drawing attention, that he'd never realized the impact he'd made simply by showing up and helping when needed. Lilia leaned close, her voice for him alone. Do you understand now? This is who you are, not the person your old job made you. This. Travis appeared through the crowd, having abandoned his booth when he heard the commotion. His face glowed with pride as he reached his father. Dad, this is amazing. I knew you helped people, but I didn't know about all of this. Carl stepped forward, addressing the crowd that had gathered. I think we need to recognize something here. Hunter Tate represents what this town is about. Neighbors helping neighbors, no fanfare, no expectation of reward. Just doing what's right because it's right. He turned to Hunter. I'd like to present you with our Community Service Award. It's not much, just a plaque, but it represents the gratitude of everyone here. That's not necessary, Hunter protested, his voice rough with emotion. I didn't do anything special. That's exactly why it matters, Eleanor interrupted gently. You didn't do it for recognition. You did it because you're a good man. Let us say thank you properly. The crowd applauded, and Hunter felt Lilia's hand tighten in his. Travis moved to his other side, and together they walked to the small stage where Carl presented a simple wooden plaque engraved with Hunter's name and the words, For service to community, Crescent Bay, thanks you. Hunter held the plaque, his throat too tight for words. Finally, he managed to speak. I came to this town 5 years ago, running from who I'd been, trying to figure out how to be a better father and a better man. You all gave me that chance. gave me and Travis a home when we needed one. These small things you're thanking me for, they're nothing compared to what this community gave us. So thank you for letting us belong here." The applause was genuine and warm, and as Hunter stepped off the stage, dozens of people approached to shake his hand or share their own stories of his help. Through it all, Lilia stayed close, her pride in him evident in every glance. Later, as the festival continued around them, Hunter, Lilia, and Travis found a quiet bench overlooking the harbor. Travis held the plaque, reading the inscription repeatedly with a grin that wouldn't fade. "So, my dad's a local hero," Travis said. "This is going on our mantle immediately." "I'm not a hero," Hunter protested weakly. "You keep saying that," Lilia said softly. "But everyone here disagrees, including me." She looked out at the water where the festival lights reflected in dancing patterns. "You know what strikes me about all those stories? You never told anyone, never sought credit or recognition. You just quietly made people's lives better, one small act at a time." "That's called being a decent person," Hunter said. "No," Lilia countered. "Decent people help when asked. Extraordinary people help without being asked, without expecting anything in return. You've been doing that for years, and it's created ripples you never saw. Eleanor told someone about you, who told someone else, who probably helped another person because of your example. That's how community works. That's how lives change." Travis nodded enthusiastically. "She's right, Dad. You're always telling me that what matters is how we treat people when nobody's watching." Well, people were watching, and they saw someone worth celebrating. Hunter sat between his son and Lilia, the plaque resting on his lap, and allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. For 5 years he'd believed he was hiding, but instead he'd been healing. Through action, through helping, through being part of something larger than his own pain. The community hadn't just given him refuge, it had given him purpose. And in fulfilling that purpose, he'd become someone he could respect again. "Thank you," he said to both of them, "for being here today. For," his voice caught, "for helping me see myself differently." Lilia rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture so natural it took his breath away. That's what people who care about each other do. We hold up mirrors until we can see ourselves clearly. As the winter sun set over Crescent Bay, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the three of them sat together, watching the community celebrate around them. Hunter thought about the photograph still on his shop shelf, about Michelle and the man he'd been, and realized he'd finally become someone better. Not perfect, still carrying wounds, still learning, but better. And sitting beside him was a woman who'd crashed into his life as dramatically as she'd crashed her yacht, showing him that sometimes the greatest rescues are mutual. He'd pulled her from freezing water, but she'd pulled him from the isolation he'd mistaken for safety. The festival continued into the evening, lights twinkling, music playing, laughter echoing across the harbor. Hunter let himself be part of it, accepting congratulations and thanks with growing grace. And when Lilia slipped her hand into his as they walked through the crowd, he didn't pull away. Instead, he held on, anchored once again, but this time by choice, rather than necessity. The recognition at the Winter Festival changed something in Hunter that he wasn't prepared for. The plaque hung on his cottage wall now, a constant reminder that his quiet acts hadn't been as invisible as he'd believed. But instead of comfort, it brought anxiety that coiled tighter with each passing day. Lilia had become a fixture in his life. Morning coffee at the shop, shared lunches, easy conversations that stretched into evenings. Travis adored her. The town had embraced her, and Hunter found himself thinking about her constantly. That was the problem. He was falling for her, and the realization terrified him more than diving into freezing water ever had. It was late December, 3 days after the festival, when Hunter found himself sitting alone in his shop long after closing. The Chris craft gleamed under the work lights. Finally finished, a testament to their collaboration. He stared at it, seeing not just a restored boat, but evidence of how deeply Lilia had woven herself into his life. His phone buzzed. "Lilia, coffee tomorrow? I have news to share." Hunter's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He should be happy, excited even. Instead, dread pooled in his stomach. News probably meant she was leaving, returning to Seattle full-time. Or worse, news meant she wanted to talk about what was clearly developing between them, and he wasn't ready for that conversation. He typed back, "Can't tomorrow, busy with a job." It was a lie. He had nothing scheduled. The next morning, Hunter avoided the shop entirely, taking his truck out to a remote beach access where he could think. The December wind cut across the sand, the Pacific churning gray and restless. He'd run here, to Crescent Bay, to this simple life, because complexity had nearly destroyed him. Michelle had left because he'd changed, because the weight of his old work had transformed him into someone she couldn't recognize or love. What made him think he deserved another chance? Lilia was brilliant, accomplished, only 38 to his 42. She had a company worth billions, homes in major cities, a world of opportunities. He was a boat mechanic with a traumatic past and a son about to leave for college. The math didn't work. The logic failed. His phone rang. Jack Morrison, a fellow veteran he'd met through Carl's support group after the festival. They'd grabbed coffee once, shared carefully edited war stories, established the kind of shorthand understanding that only came from similar experiences. "Heard you're hiding?" Jack said without preamble. "Want to talk about it?" "I'm not hiding," Hunter protested. "Just needed space." "Right. That's why you're at Dead Man's Beach in December, instead of at your shop where a certain CEO is probably wondering where you disappeared to." Jack's voice carried knowing amusement. "Look, man, I don't know the whole story, but Carl mentioned you seemed rattled at the festival. Whatever you're running from now, it's not going to work." "I'm not right for her," Hunter said, the words tumbling out. "She's too young, too successful, too everything. I'm just a guy who fixes boats and has a past I can't fully explain. What happens when she realizes she made a mistake? When she sees I'm not worth the effort?" "You really believe that?" Jack asked quietly. "After all those people at the festival told you what you mean to this community? After she's shown up every day for weeks to learn from you?" "Hunter, whatever story you're telling yourself about not being enough, it's wrong." "You don't understand," Hunter said. "My ex-wife left because I couldn't be who she needed. I failed at that once. What makes you think I won't fail again?" "Because you're not that same man," Jack said firmly. "And this isn't the same situation. But you're right about one thing. If you keep running, you will fail. Not because you're not enough, but because you're too scared to find out that maybe you are." The words hit like a physical blow. Hunter ended the call and sat in his truck, watching the waves crash against the rocks. He thought about the photograph in his shop, about the man he'd been before everything fell apart. That man had believed in himself, had taken risks, had loved without fear. When had he become so afraid? By evening, guilt gnawed at him. He texted Lilia, "Sorry about today. Can we talk tomorrow?" Her response came quickly. "Of course. Shop at 8. That night, Hunter lay awake, rehearsing conversations in his mind. He'd tell her the truth, that he cared about her, that she'd become essential to his life, but that he was terrified of destroying something good because he wasn't capable of being what she needed. He'd be honest, lay out all his inadequacies, and let her decide. It was the right thing to do, even if the thought of her walking away made his chest ache with a pain that rivaled anything his old life had inflicted. Because Lilia deserved someone whole, someone who could match her brilliance and ambition. And Hunter wasn't sure he'd ever be that person again. Outside, winter rain began to fall, and Hunter listened to it drum against the roof, wondering if he was about to make the biggest mistake of his second chance at life. The morning arrived gray and cold, rain turning to sleet that clicked against the shop windows. Hunter was there early, coffee brewing, the space meticulously organized thanks to their collaborative effort weeks ago. Every surface reminded him of Lilia. Her laughter, her questions, the way she'd shared her grief about Natasha and trusted him with her vulnerabilities. She arrived precisely at 8, shaking sleet from her jacket. But something was different. Her eyes held determination, and she carried not coffee, but a folder thick with papers. "We need to talk," they said simultaneously, then shared uncertain smiles. "You first," Hunter said, cowardice making him defer. Lilia set the folder on the workbench, her posture straight, CEO mode, Hunter recognized. "I've made a decision about the company. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations, promoting my COO to handle management while I focus on research and development. It means I can work remotely most of the time, be more flexible with location." Hunter's heart hammered. "That's a big change." "It is," Lilia agreed. "But here's the thing. I'm making this choice because it's right for me, not because of anyone else. I've been running for 4 years, burying myself in work to avoid grief. Being here, learning from you, being part of this community, it's shown me there's another way to live. A better way." She moved closer, her voice softening. "But I need to know something, Hunter. These past weeks, what we've built, is it just friendship to you? Because for me, it's become more than that. You've become more than that." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Every instinct screamed at Hunter to retreat, to protect himself with the speech he'd rehearsed. Instead, Travis's words echoed. "You can't hide forever, Dad. And Jax, you're too scared to find out that maybe you are enough." "I'm terrified," Hunter admitted, the confession scraping his throat. "Yesterday, I avoided you because I'm falling for you, and it scares me senseless. You're accomplished, brilliant, young, everything I'm not. My ex-wife left because I became someone she couldn't love. What happens when you see all my broken pieces and realize I'm not worth the effort?" Lilia's expression shifted from uncertainty to something fierce. "Stop," she said firmly. "Stop deciding for me what I can handle, what I deserve. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a man who dove into freezing water to save a stranger, who rebuilt his life around being a good father, who helps his community without seeking recognition, who listened to me talk about my dead best friend without flinching, who held me while I cried, who sees me as a person instead of a bank account." She stepped forward, closing the distance until they were inches apart. 4 years I've been numb, Hunter. Just going through motions, building bigger and bigger successes that meant less and less. Then I crashed my yacht and you pulled me out of the water, and suddenly I could feel again. You did that. Not because you're perfect, because you're real. Because you understand loss and second chances and building something meaningful from ruins. I'm 42, Hunter protested weakly. You're 38, Lilia interrupted. 4 years is nothing. My parents had 7 years between them and were married for 30 years before cancer took my mom. Age doesn't matter. What matters is this. She pressed her hand against his chest, over his heart. What matters is whether you're brave enough to let me in, to stop running from something good because you're afraid it'll turn bad. Hunter's defenses crumbled. All his careful walls, built over 5 years of isolation, came down in the face of her honesty. I don't want to hurt you, he whispered. Don't want to fail you, like I failed Michelle. You didn't fail her, Lilia said gently. You became someone different, someone better, and she couldn't accept that change. That's not failure, that's growth. And I'm not asking you to be anything other than exactly who you are right now, in this moment. The sleet intensified outside, wind howling against the building. But inside the shop, in their small circle of warmth, something shifted. Hunter raised his hand to Lilia's face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I'm not good at this, he said. Haven't let anyone close since Michelle left. Don't know if I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together, Lilia said. Slowly. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who've been through hell trying to build something good. Hunter leaned forward, his forehead touching hers, breathing in her scent. Coffee and rain, and something uniquely her. Okay, he whispered. Okay, let's try. Lilia's arms went around him, and they stood holding each other as the storm raged outside. It wasn't a dramatic declaration or a perfect movie moment. It was messy and uncertain and achingly real. Two damaged people choosing to be brave together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. Lilia laughed shakily. So that's settled. Now what? Now, Hunter said, surprising himself. I take you to dinner. Proper date, not just coffee at the shop. I'd like that, Lilia said. But Hunter, whatever this becomes, wherever it goes, thank you for giving us a chance. He kissed her then, soft and careful, a promise of possibility. Outside, the sleet turned back to rain, gentler now, washing everything clean. Spring came to Crescent Bay with explosive color. Wildflowers blanketing the coastal hills, the Pacific shifting from winter gray to brilliant blue. Hunter and Lilia had spent the past 4 months building their relationship with deliberate care, learning each other's rhythms and wounds. She split time between Crescent Bay and Seattle, her restructured role allowing the flexibility she'd craved. Travis had been accepted to Oregon State's engineering program and would leave in the fall, a bittersweet milestone that Hunter was learning to embrace rather than dread. Today marked the grand opening of something new. Tate Marine Community Workshop, a project that had grown from a simple idea into something transformative. Using part of Lilia's investment and community fundraising, they'd expanded Hunter's shop to include a teaching space where locals could learn boat repair, woodworking, and other practical skills. It was Lilia's vision, inspired by Hunter's quiet mentorship, designed to give back to the community that had embraced them both. The crowd gathered outside the workshop was impressive. Town officials, curious residents, veterans from Carl's support group, and Eleanor Martinez with her granddaughter Sarah. Lilia stood beside Hunter, professional in a way he rarely saw anymore, preparing to address the crowd. But before the ceremony began, a young woman approached, maybe mid-20s, with a boy of about 7 or 8 holding her hand. "Mr. Tate?" she said hesitantly. "I'm Rebecca Walsh. I don't know if you remember, but 8 years ago you helped my mom when her car broke down on Highway 101 during that terrible snowstorm." Hunter's mind clicked. Eleanor Martinez's story at the Winter Festival. "Your mom is Eleanor," he said. "I remember. Is she here?" "She's over there," Rebecca said, gesturing to where Eleanor stood. "But I had to talk to you first. See, that night changed everything for our family. Mom has diabetes, and if she'd been stranded longer in that cold, she could have died. But because you stopped, because you fixed her car and got her home safely, I still have my mother. And more than that, this is my son, Tommy." She placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tommy wouldn't exist if my mom had died that night. She lived to see me graduate college, get married, have this incredible kid. Your one act of kindness literally created a future that wouldn't have existed otherwise. I've been looking for you for years to say thank you." The words hit Hunter like a physical force. He stared at the boy, Tommy, with bright, curious eyes and a gap-toothed smile, alive and present because of a forgotten roadside repair 8 years ago. The ripple effect Lilia had talked about, made manifest in this young life. Lilia's hand found Hunter's, squeezing tight. Tommy looked up at Hunter with open admiration. "Grandma says you're a hero. Can you teach me to fix stuff?" Yes," Hunter managed, his voice rough. "I'd be honored to teach you." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough. You gave us everything and didn't even know it." As Rebecca and Tommy joined the crowd, more people came forward with their own stories. Carl talking about how Hunter's help had inspired him to expand his veterans program. A teenager explaining how Hunter's free boat safety lessons had landed him a summer job at the marina. An elderly man describing how Hunter had repaired his fishing boat for free, allowing him to keep working and maintain his independence. Each story revealed connections Hunter had never seen, lives touched in ways he'd never imagined. The community hadn't just accepted him, he'd helped shape it, one small act at a time, creating a web of goodwill and mutual support that extended far beyond his awareness. When Lilia finally gave her speech, opening the workshop officially, she spoke about community, second chances, and the power of one person choosing to help without expecting reward. She thanked Hunter publicly for inspiring the project, for showing her what meaningful success looked like. "I built $1 billion company," Lilia said to the assembled crowd. "But the most valuable thing I've built is right here. A partnership with a man who taught me that wealth isn't measured in money, but in lives touched, in communities strengthened, in small acts of kindness that ripple outward in ways we can't predict or control. This workshop exists because Hunter Tate showed up when someone needed help. Again and again, for years, without fanfare. Today we're making that legacy permanent." The applause was thunderous, and Hunter stood beside her, overwhelmed by the evidence of his impact. Travis appeared at his other side, pride radiating from every pore. "Dad, this is incredible. Do you see what you've built?" Hunter looked at the workshop, at the crowd, at Lilia and Travis flanking him, at young Tommy, a life that wouldn't exist without his intervention. "We built it," he corrected. "All of us, together." As the crowd dispersed to tour the new facility, Eleanor approached, pulling Hunter into a fierce hug. "You saved my life so I could watch my daughter become a mother, so I could meet my grandson. Every moment I've had with them these past 8 years, that's your gift to me. Don't ever forget the magnitude of what you did." Hunter held the elderly woman, understanding finally sinking in. He hadn't just fixed a car or jumped a battery. He'd preserved futures, created possibilities, allowed love to continue across generations. The weight of it was staggering and humbling and beautiful all at once. That evening, after the celebration ended, Hunter and Lilia stood in the empty workshop, the space still smelling of fresh paint and new wood. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Overwhelmed," Hunter admitted. "I had no idea. All those years, I thought I was just getting by, hiding. But I was building something without realizing it." "That's the best kind of legacy?" Lilia said. "The one you create by simply being who you are, helping because it's right, not because you want recognition. Tommy exists because of you, Hunter. That little boy, his whole future. It wouldn't be here without your choice to stop on a snowy highway 8 years ago." Hunter turned in her embrace, pulling her close. "Thank you," he said, "for pushing me to see this, to accept it, for believing I was worth knowing when I couldn't see it myself." "Always," Lilia promised. "We saved each other, remember? You pulled me from the water, I pulled you from isolation. We're even." They stood together in the workshop that would teach countless people, the space filled with tools and possibility. Outside, spring twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold. And somewhere in town, a young boy named Tommy played, alive and laughing, a testament to the power of showing up when needed. Hunter had spent 5 years believing he was broken, unworthy of connection or love. But standing here with Lilia, surrounded by evidence of lives he'd touched and futures he'd made possible, he finally understood the truth. Healing didn't mean erasing the past or becoming who he'd been before. It meant accepting his scars, using them to build something better, and allowing people to love him not despite his wounds, but because of the person those wounds had helped him become. The June sun hung golden over Crescent Bay Marina, turning the water to liquid copper as the community gathered for what had become a regular Saturday tradition. Open Workshop Day at Tate Marine Community Workshop. 6 months had passed since the opening, and the space had become the heart of the waterfront, always filled with people learning, teaching, sharing skills and stories. Hunter stood inside, watching through the window as Lilia demonstrated basic electrical wiring to a group of teenagers, her confidence and natural teaching ability never failing to amaze him. She'd fully transitioned from CEO to Chief Innovation Officer at Chambers Global Technologies, spending 3 weeks a month in Crescent Bay and 1 week in Seattle. The change had transformed her. She laughed more freely, carried herself with relaxed grace instead of corporate tension, had even started a small garden at the cottage she now shared with Hunter. They'd married quietly 2 months ago, a simple ceremony at sunset on the beach with Travis, Carl, Eleanor, and a handful of close friends. No extravagant celebration, just 2 people who'd found each other in the aftermath of near tragedy, choosing to build a life together. Lilia's engagement ring was made from salvaged brass from her crashed yacht, transformed by Hunter's hands into something beautiful. A perfect metaphor for what they'd done with their broken pieces. Travis appeared beside Hunter, home for summer break before his sophomore year at Oregon State. He'd grown into himself over the past year, confident and purposeful, studying engineering with the same intensity Hunter brought to restoration work. "Big crowd today," Travis observed. "Tommy's group is getting good. Did you see the birdhouse he finished?" Hunter smiled. Young Tommy Walsh had become a fixture at the workshop, showing up every Saturday with his mother Rebecca, soaking up knowledge with fierce determination. The boy who existed because of a roadside repair 8 years ago was now learning to build and fix things himself. the circle completing in a way that still moved Hunter to tears when he thought about it too much. He's got talent, Hunter agreed. Reminds me of someone at that age. Me? Travis asked hopefully. You, Hunter confirmed, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders. Speaking of which, your mom called. She's in town and wants to meet for coffee. Travis's expression grew complicated. Michelle had reached out 6 months ago after seeing a news story about the workshop, asking tentatively to reconnect with her son. The relationship was fragile, rebuilt slowly through careful conversations and managed expectations, but it existed, which was more than Hunter had thought possible. You okay with that? Travis asked, knowing his father's history with Michelle was complicated. Yeah, Hunter said honestly. She's your mother. What happened between us doesn't change that. And honestly, I'm grateful for how things worked out. If we'd stayed together, fought through it, I wouldn't be who I am now. Wouldn't have found Lilia, wouldn't have built this. He gestured to the workshop, the community beyond. Sometimes the hardest endings lead to the best beginnings. Carl entered through the main door, accompanied by 2 younger veterans Hunter had been mentoring. Got your next students, Tate. These 2 need to learn basic engine repair. Happy to help, Hunter said, shaking hands with the veterans. Over the past months, the workshop had become an unofficial extension of Carl's support program, giving former military and security personnel a place to learn civilian skills and transition to new lives. Hunter poured everything he'd learned about his own difficult transition into helping others navigate theirs. As afternoon faded toward evening, the workshop gradually emptied until only Hunter, Lilia, and a handful of volunteers remained, cleaning up and organizing for the next day. Lilia found Hunter in his original shop area, now preserved as workspace for complex restorations. He was looking at the photograph of him, Michelle, and baby Travis. Still on its shelf, no longer a source of pain, but a reminder of how far he'd traveled. Thinking deep thoughts? Lilia asked, sliding her arms around his waist. Just reflecting, Hunter said, turning to pull her close. 7 months ago, I was hiding in this shop, convinced I was too broken to deserve anything good. Now I'm married to an incredible woman, running a community workshop, helping people transition to better lives. It's almost too much good fortune to believe. It's not fortune, Lilia corrected gently. It's the natural consequence of who you are. You've been giving to this community for years. This is just the universe balancing the scales. What about you? Hunter asked. Any regrets about stepping back from the company? About settling in a small coastal town instead of Seattle high society? Lilia laughed, the sound full of genuine joy. Regrets, Hunter? I have a life now. A real one, not just a schedule. I wake up next to someone I love. I teach kids about technology and business. I have neighbors who know my name and friends who care about me, not my bank account. Natasha would be so proud of what I've built here. Not because it's profitable, but because it's meaningful. She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo from earlier. Tommy concentrating intently on his birdhouse, tongue caught between his teeth in focus. That kid exists because you stopped to help his grandmother. How many more Tommies are out there living fuller lives because of your small acts of kindness? That's a legacy worth more than any company valuation. Hunter pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. Through the window, the sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold. The harbor stretched out peacefully, boats bobbing gently at their moorings. Somewhere out there, beyond the breakwater, was Devil's Spine, the rocks that had brought them together in the most dramatic rescue of Hunter's life. I used to think that night was about me saving you," Hunter said quietly. "But really, we saved each other. You were drowning in water, I was drowning in isolation. We pulled each other to safety. And built something beautiful from the wreckage," Lilia added. She turned in his arms, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "Ready to head home? I'm making that pasta dish you love." "In a minute," Hunter said. He wanted to hold this moment. The golden light, Lilia in his arms, the workshop behind them full of tools and possibility. The community beyond that had embraced them both. Travis healthy and thriving. Michelle reconnecting with her son. Young Tommy learning to build things with his own hands. From broken pieces, a crashed yacht, a damaged veteran, a grieving CEO, a fractured family. They'd created something whole. Not perfect, still carrying scars, but functional and beautiful and real. That was the truth Hunter had learned. Healing didn't mean erasing damage. It meant integrating it, using it to build something stronger, more compassionate, more authentic. As they locked up the workshop and walked hand in hand toward home, past neighbors who waved and called greetings, Hunter felt a peace he'd never thought possible. The photograph in his shop, the plaque on his wall, young Tommy's existence, Lilia's hand in his. They were all part of the same story. A story that started with a stranger's courage in freezing water and became something far greater than either of them had imagined. Sometimes destiny begins with a small act and an open heart, but it's built through choosing connection over isolation, choosing to heal rather than hide, choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, you're worthy of the love and community that surrounds you. Hunter had finally learned that lesson. And as the June evening settled soft and warm over Crescent Bay, he walked home with his wife, toward a future built not on running from the past, but on embracing it, healing it, and using it to create something beautiful that would ripple outward for generations yet to come. The ocean whispered against the shore, eternal and forgiving. And Hunter Tate, veteran, father, husband, teacher, and reluctant hero, was finally completely home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.